Hey, everyone. Get ready, because I've got a super cool story for you today. It's about a guy named Jake Harper. He's just a normal dude, or at least, that's what everyone around him thought. Jake lived in a small, quiet neighborhood. You know, the kind: neat little houses, green lawns all mowed perfectly, and rules about everything. People there liked things to look nice and stay the same. But Jake? He was different. He loved growing his own food in his yard. We're talking juicy red tomatoes, crunchy orange carrots, and all kinds of yummy stuff. For Jake, it wasn't just something to do, it made his heart happy. Every morning, he'd go outside, dig in the dirt, and smile at his little plants. But here's the big twist: not everyone was okay with Jake's garden. Nope, not at all. There was this group called the HOA, the Homeowners Association. They're like the bosses of the neighborhood. They make rules about what you can and can't do. Want to paint your house blue? Ask the HOA. Want to put up a swing set? Better check with them first. And Jake's garden? Oh boy, they did not like it. They thought it looked messy, like it didn't fit with their perfect little world. They were about to cause some real trouble for Jake, and he had no idea what was coming. Before we jump into this wild tale, I've got a fun question for you. Has anyone ever told you no when you were just doing your own thing? Maybe you were building something cool, or drawing, or playing, and someone said, "Stop that." It's annoying, right? Tell me about it in the comments, I really want to know. Oh, and if you like stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more. Okay, let's get back to Jake. Picture this: he's a guy who keeps to himself. He's not loud or bossy. He doesn't start fights or yell at people. He just likes his quiet life and his little garden. His house was small, with a white fence and a big backyard where the magic happened. Every day after work, he'd grab his shovel, put on his old sneakers, and head outside. He'd water his plants and pull out weeds. Sometimes he'd even talk to them like, "Grow big, little tomato." It was his happy place. The sun would shine, the birds would chirp, and Jake felt like everything was just right. His neighbors saw him out there, but they didn't think much of it. To them, he was just Jake, the guy with the dirt on his hands. Some waved hello. Others didn't even look his way. They were busy keeping their lawns green and their mailboxes shiny. Everything had to be perfect in this neighborhood, because the HOA said so. And Jake? Well, he didn't seem like a troublemaker. He was just a guy who liked vegetables. How could that be a problem, right? But here's where it gets interesting. The HOA had a leader named Karen Wilson. Oh, Karen was something else. She walked around like she owned the whole street. She had a clipboard and a frown, and she loved telling people what to do. "Trim that bush," she'd say. "Your trash can's too close to the road." Karen wanted everything to look like a picture in a magazine: super neat, super boring. And when she saw Jake's garden, with its rows of plants and patches of dirt, she didn't like it one bit. To her, it was messy. It wasn't fancy enough for her perfect neighborhood. Jake didn't know it yet, but Karen and the HOA were watching him. They didn't just want his garden to look nicer, they wanted it gone. Completely gone. They thought it made the whole street look bad, like Jake was breaking some big, important rule. And in their minds, rules were everything. If you didn't follow them, watch out. Trouble was coming your way. Now, Jake wasn't the kind of guy to get mad easily. He wasn't going to march over to Karen's house and yell at her. That wasn't his style. He just kept tending his garden, day after day. He'd pick a ripe tomato and eat it right there in the sunshine. He'd smile at the carrots poking out of the ground. To him, this was his little world, and he wasn't hurting anyone. Why would anyone care so much about a few plants? But Karen cared. A lot. She started whispering to the other neighbors. "Look at that garden," she'd say, pointing over the fence. "It's an eyesore. We can't have that here." Some neighbors nodded, afraid to disagree with her. Others didn't really mind, but they didn't say anything either. Karen had a way of making people listen to her, whether they wanted to or not. And soon, she decided it was time to do something about Jake. One day, while Jake was watering his plants, he didn't notice Karen staring from across the street. She had that look in her eye, the kind that says, "I'm in charge, and you're in trouble." She went home, sat at her desk, and started writing a letter. A letter that was going to change everything for Jake. He didn't know it yet, but his quiet little life was about to get a whole lot louder. So, what was Jake going to do? Would he fight back? Would he give up? Or would he come up with something so clever it would surprise everyone? That's the fun part of the story. It's full of surprises, and I can't wait to tell you what happens next. But first, let's hear from you again. Have you ever had a neighbor or someone bossy tell you to stop doing something you love? Maybe it was planting flowers, or riding your bike, or even eating a snack they didn't like. Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one. Jake's story is just getting started, and trust me, it's going to get wild. His garden might seem small now, but it's about to turn into something huge, something no one in that neighborhood could guess. The HOA thought they could boss him around, but Jake? He's got a trick up his sleeve. And when it comes out, jaws are going to drop. Stick with me, because this is one adventure you won't want to miss. Okay, let's dive into the juicy part of Jake's story. Things were about to get tricky for our garden-loving guy. It all kicked off with a letter. Yep, just a plain old piece of paper, but oh boy, it was a big deal. One sunny afternoon, Jake strolled out to his mailbox. The birds were singing, the sky was blue, and he was probably thinking about his tomatoes. He opened the mailbox and pulled out an envelope. It had his name on it, Mr. Jake Harper. He ripped it open, expecting maybe a coupon or a friendly note. But nope, what he read made his eyes go wide. The letter said, "Dear Mr. Harper, your vegetable garden breaks Rule 17B of our community guidelines. You have 7 days to get rid of it, or you'll have to pay a fine." A fine. That means money. Jake didn't want to lose. And at the bottom of the letter? A fancy signature from Karen Wilson, the HOA president. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, remember. They're the people who boss everyone around in the neighborhood. And Karen? She was the bossiest of them all. Now, Karen wasn't just any old lady. She loved being in charge. She walked around with her head high, like she was the queen of the street. Her hair was always perfect, her clothes were super neat, and she carried a clipboard everywhere. That clipboard was her weapon. She'd write down anything she didn't like. And picking on people? That was her favorite game. If your grass was too long, she'd tell you. If your dog barked once, she'd complain. Karen wanted everything her way, and she didn't care who she bossed around to make it happen. So, when she saw Jake's garden with its dirt piles and green plants, she decided it had to go. To her, it was ugly. She called it an eyesore, which is a fancy word for something that looks bad. "We can't have dirt ruining our perfect streets," she'd say. She'd stand there, hands on her hips, her nose all scrunched up like Jake's carrots smelled stinky. She'd drive by his house in her shiny car, glaring out the window. And Jake? He didn't yell back or make a fuss. He just smiled and waved, nice as could be. That's who Jake was, calm, friendly, and not looking for trouble. But Karen didn't like that smile. She didn't like that Jake wasn't scared of her. Most neighbors just nodded when she talked. "Yes, Karen," they'd say, too afraid to argue. If she said, "Cut your bushes," they'd grab scissors that same day. If she said, "No loud music," they'd turn it off fast. They didn't want her mad, because when Karen got mad, she'd write letters or call meetings or make you pay fines. Nobody wanted that. So, they all went along with her, keeping their yards perfect and their mouths shut. But Jake? He was different. He didn't nod. He didn't run to pull out his plants. When that letter came, he didn't panic or cry. He just stood there by his mailbox, holding the paper, reading it again. 7 days, it said. 7 days to rip out his tomatoes, his carrots, his little green babies he'd worked so hard to grow. Most people would have been mad, really mad. They might have stomped their feet or shouted, "That's not fair." But not Jake. He wasn't mad yet. He was thinking. His brain was turning, like a wheel spinning slow but steady. And that made Karen a little nervous, even if she didn't know it right then. See, Karen thought she had all the power. She thought one letter would scare Jake into doing what she wanted. She'd sit at her big desk, writing her rules, smiling to herself. "This'll fix him," she probably thought. She imagined Jake grabbing a shovel, digging up his garden, and saying, "Sorry, Karen, you're right. That's what she wanted, total control. But Jake wasn't like that. He wasn't loud or flashy, no way. He didn't wear fancy clothes or drive a big car. He was just a guy in old sneakers, with dirt under his nails and a quiet smile. But that quiet? It was sneaky. It hid something big. The next day, Karen drove by again. She slowed down, staring at Jake's yard. The garden was still there, tomatoes hanging red, carrots poking out of the dirt. She frowned. He hasn't done it yet, she muttered. She expected to see empty soil, not plants still growing tall. Jake was outside, watering them with a little can. He looked up, saw her glaring, and waved. Just a small wave, like nothing was wrong. Karen's nose wrinkled even more. It's an eyesore, she said loud enough for him to hear. Then she sped off, already planning her next move. Back at home, Karen told the neighbors. That garden's got to go, she said, shaking her head. It makes us all look bad. Some people nodded, scared to say no. Yeah, it's kind of messy, one said. Dirt's not pretty, another agreed. But a few didn't care. Old Mr. Thompson, who lived next to Jake, just shrugged. I like his tomatoes, he said. Karen ignored him. She didn't want to hear that. She wanted everyone on her side, ready to make Jake obey. Jake, though. He kept going about his day. He watered his plants. He pulled a few weeds. He even ate a carrot right there in the yard, crunching it loud and happy. The letter sat on his kitchen table, but he didn't look at it much. 7 days, it said. 6 days left now. 5 soon. Time was ticking, but Jake didn't seem worried. He wasn't yelling or fighting. He was thinking hard. What was he planning? Nobody knew, not even Karen. And that's what made this so exciting. Karen started to feel something funny. She couldn't say it out loud, but deep down, she wondered why Jake wasn't scared. Why wasn't he begging her to let him keep the garden? Most people would have knocked on her door by now, saying, please, don't find me. But Jake didn't. He just kept smiling, kept gardening, kept being Jake. And that quiet strength. It was like a secret weapon Karen didn't see coming. So, the tension was building like a balloon, getting bigger and bigger. Karen wanted that garden gone. She wanted Jake to give up. She thought her letter would do the trick. But Jake wasn't giving up. Not yet. He had 6 days left, and something was brewing in his head. What would he do? Would he rip out the plants? Pay the fine? Or, something else? Something nobody expected? That's the fun of the story, it's full of surprises, and we're just getting started. Alright, let's keep this story rolling. Things were getting wild in Jake's neighborhood, and the tension was growing like a big, stretchy balloon. Days went by after that first letter from Karen, the HOA boss. She kept her eyes on Jake's yard, sneaking peeks over her fence every chance she got. She'd stand there, arms crossed, waiting for Jake to grab a shovel and yank out his plants. She wanted that garden gone, those tomatoes, those carrots, all of it. In her mind, Jake would give up fast. He'd read her letter, get scared, and dig everything up. But guess what? Jake didn't do that. Not even close. Instead, something super strange started happening. The days turned into nights, and the neighborhood got quiet except for Jake's backyard. Late, when the moon was up and most people were asleep, weird noises floated through the air. Bang. 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 It sounded like hammering, like someone hitting nails into wood. And then flickering lights. Neighbors peeked out their windows and saw little glows dancing around Jake's yard. Not big, bright lights, but small ones, like fireflies or tiny lanterns. What's he up to? They whispered to each other, rubbing sleepy eyes. Nobody knew, and that made it exciting and a little spooky. Karen wasn't happy. Oh no, she was getting madder by the minute. She thought one letter would fix everything, but Jake didn't listen. So, she wrote another one. You've got 5 days left, it said. She mailed it, sure that would scare him. But the garden stayed. The tomatoes still hung there, red and juicy. The carrots still poked out of the dirt. So, Karen wrote a third letter. Final warning, she scratched onto the paper, her handwriting all big and messy because she was so annoyed. She practically threw that letter into Jake's mailbox herself, stomping her feet as she did it. But Jake? He didn't freak out. He didn't run around yelling or beg Karen to stop. He stayed quiet, super quiet. When neighbors saw him during the day, they'd ask, "Hey, Jake, what's with those letters?" He'd just nod, give a little smile, and say, "Oh, it's fine." That was it. No big answers, no complaining. But if you looked close, his eyes had a spark like a tiny light twinkling. It was like he knew something nobody else did. That spark made people wonder. What was Jake hiding? One guy, old Mr. Thompson, lived right next to Jake. He was a quiet old man with glasses and a cane, and he liked watching the world from his porch. One night, he saw something crazy. Jake was carrying big, shiny pieces of glass into his backyard. They were tall and clear, like windows, but way bigger. Mr. Thompson scratched his head. "What's that boy doing with all that glass?" he mumbled. The next day, he told Karen about it. "Saw Jake with some glass panels," he said. Karen laughed aloud, mean laugh. "Probably just fixing a window," she said, rolling her eyes. "He's not smart enough to do anything else." Oh, Karen, she had no clue. She thought Jake was simple, but something big was brewing. Every night, those noises kept coming. Bang. Bang. Clink. More hammering, more little lights. Neighbors started talking more. "Maybe he's building something," one said. "Nah, he's just being weird," another replied. Kids in the neighborhood made up stories. "Maybe he's making a rocket ship," one giggled. "Or a secret hideout," said another. They didn't know what was true, but they couldn't stop guessing. Jake's backyard was turning into a mystery, and everyone wanted to solve it, especially Karen. Karen's frustration was growing huge. She'd drive by Jake's house every day, squinting at his yard. The garden was still there, mocking her. She'd mutter to herself, "Why won't he just quit?" She wanted to win. She wanted Jake to rip out those plants and say, "You're right, Karen." But he didn't. During the day, he'd water his garden like nothing was wrong. He'd wave at her when she glared. And at night? Those noises kept going. Bang. Clink. Flash. It was driving her nuts. She couldn't sleep, wondering what he was doing. One evening, a few neighbors got brave. They tiptoed closer to Jake's fence, trying to peek. It was dark, but they saw shapes, tall things, shiny things. "Is that wood?" one whispered. "And glass," said another. They couldn't tell for sure, but it wasn't just a garden anymore. Something was growing back there, and it wasn't plants. Jake was up to something big, and he wasn't telling a soul. Mr. Thompson kept watching, too. Another night, he saw Jake with more glass, big sheets of it, sparkling under the moonlight. He even heard a saw buzzing, cutting wood. "That's no window fix," Mr. Thompson thought. He wanted to ask Jake, but Jake was sneaky. When people said, "What's going on back there?" he'd just shrug and smile. "Oh, nothing much," he'd say. But that spark in his eyes? It was getting brighter. Karen didn't believe any of it was important. "He's just being stubborn," she told the neighbors. "He'll give up soon." She sent that third letter, the final warning, and waited. She thought Jake would come running, scared of the fine. But days passed, and nothing changed. The garden stayed. The noises got louder. The lights got brighter. Karen's face got redder. She started snapping at everyone. "He's breaking the rules," she'd yell. "We can't let him get away with this." But Jake wasn't breaking. He wasn't giving up. Each night, his secret got bigger. Whatever he was building, it was taking shape. Neighbors heard more than just hammering now. There was clanking, like metal hitting metal. One kid swore he saw Jake with a big roll of wire. "Maybe he's making a robot," the kid said, eyes wide. Nobody knew for sure, but the mystery was growing, and so was the fun. Karen tried to act cool, but she was losing it inside. She'd pace her house, muttering about Jake. "He thinks he's so smart," she'd say. "I'll show him." She didn't know what he was doing, but she hated that he wasn't afraid of her. Most people shook when she sent letters. Jake didn't. He kept going, night after night, building something nobody could guess. And that made Karen's blood boil. So, the clock was ticking. Karen's final warning said Jake had just a few days left. Would he stop? Would he dig up the garden? Or would he finish whatever crazy thing he was making? The neighborhood was buzzing with whispers. Mr. Thompson kept watching. Karen kept fuming. And Jake? He kept smiling, quiet as ever, with that sneaky spark in his eyes. Something big was coming, something that would flip the story upside down. Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next. Okay, get ready, because this is the best part of Jake's story. Everything was building up to this one big moment, and it was about to explode like a giant surprise party. The day finally came, the day of the HOA meeting. Karen, the bossy HOA president, had been waiting for this. She called everyone in the neighborhood to the community center, a little building where they all sat in chairs and talked about rules. Karen was ready to win. She wanted to slap Jake with a huge fine, tons of money he'd have to pay for not digging up his garden. She thought she had him trapped, like a mouse in a cage. Karen stood up front, her arms crossed and a big smirk on her face. That smirk said, "I'm in charge, and you're in trouble." She looked out at all the neighbors sitting there, some sleepy, some curious, and started talking. "Mr. Harper has ignored our rules long enough," she said, her voice loud and sharp. "He got my letters, 3 of them. I told him to get rid of that messy garden, but he didn't listen. Now it's time to pay." She pointed at Jake, who was sitting in the back, quiet as usual. "Any defense, Jake?" she asked, her smirk growing bigger. She thought he'd just mumble something and give up. Oh boy, was she wrong. Jake didn't look scared. He didn't look mad. He just stood up, slow and calm, like he had all the time in the world. Everyone turned to look at him. His old sneakers squeaked on the floor, and his hands were in his pockets. He smiled a small, sneaky smile and said, "Why don't you all come see for yourselves?" His voice was soft, but it had power. The neighbors blinked. "See what?" they whispered to each other. Karen rolled her eyes so hard you could almost hear it. "This is silly," she muttered. But everyone was curious now, super curious. What was Jake talking about? So, they all got up. Chairs scraped the floor, and people grumbled a little. "This better be good," one guy said. "I was about to eat dinner," complained another. But they followed Jake anyway, a big crowd shuffling out of the building and down the street. Karen marched along too, her nose in the air, thinking Jake was wasting her time. They walked to his house, right up to his backyard fence. It was getting dark outside, the sky turning purple, and the air felt buzzy like something huge was about to happen. Jake stopped by the gate to his yard. The crowd gathered around, some standing on tiptoes to peek over the fence. "What's he got?" a kid asked. "SHH, wait and see," said his mom. Karen stood off to the side, arms crossed, tapping her foot. "Hurry up, Jake," she snapped. Jake didn't rush. He just turned to the crowd and said, "Ready." Then he reached down and flipped a switch, a little button nobody had noticed before. Click. Lights blazed on, bright, warm, glowing lights. They lit up the whole backyard, and everyone gasped. Big, loud gasps, like they'd seen a magic trick. "Whoa! What's that? No way!" The noises filled the air. Karen's mouth dropped open, and her eyes got huge. She couldn't roll them now, not this time. Because right there, where Jake's little garden used to be, was something amazing. It wasn't just plants in the dirt anymore. It was a greenhouse. Now, a greenhouse isn't some shaky old shed. Nope, this was a beautiful building made of glass and wood. The glass walls sparkled under the lights, clear and shiny, letting everyone see inside. And inside? Oh wow, it was like a jungle. There were rows of vegetables, red tomatoes, orange carrots, green beans, all growing tall and happy. But that wasn't all. There were flowers too, pretty ones in every color, popping out of pots. And fruit trees. Little trees with apples and lemons, growing right there in Jake's yard. Soft lights hung above, making everything glow like a fairy tale. It wasn't messy or ugly, it was the coolest thing anyone had ever seen. The neighbors couldn't stop staring. "Look at those flowers," one lady said. "Are those apples real?" a kid asked, pressing his nose to the glass. "It's like a store in his backyard," said Mr. Thompson, the old guy who'd seen Jake with those glass panels. He was grinning now, proud he'd spotted the clues. The crowd buzzed with chatter, pointing and smiling. Kids ran closer, trying to peek at every corner. Even the grumbly guy who wanted dinner forgot about food, he was too amazed. Karen didn't say a word. She just stood there, her smirk gone, her face turning pink. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Jake turned to her, calm as ever, and said, "I didn't break your rules, Karen. I just made something better." His voice was steady, and he looked right into her eyes. The crowd went quiet, waiting to see what she'd do. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't know what to say. For once, the bossy lady had nothing. See, Jake had been sneaky all along. Those late-night noises, the hammering, the lights, the glass panels weren't random. He'd been building this greenhouse, bit by bit, right under everyone's noses. Karen thought he was ignoring her letters to be stubborn, but he wasn't. He was working on a plan, a big, awesome plan. The HOA rules said no messy gardens, but they didn't say anything about a greenhouse. Jake found a way to keep growing his plants and make it look amazing, all without breaking a single rule. The neighbors started clapping. "This is so cool," one shouted. "Way to go, Jake," said another. Kids cheered, and even the quiet people smiled. They weren't mad about the garden anymore, they loved this new thing. It was like Jake turned a fight into a party. Karen tried to speak. This isn't," she stammered, but nobody listened. They were too busy looking at the greenhouse, asking Jake questions. "How'd you build it? Can I have a tomato? Does it stay warm in there?" Jake just nodded and smiled, happy to share. That moment was huge. Jake didn't yell or argue to win, he showed everyone something better. Karen wanted to punish him, but now she looked silly. The crowd wasn't on her side anymore, they were on Jake's. His backyard wasn't an eyesore now, it was the best spot in the neighborhood. And Karen? She couldn't boss this away. Jake's big reveal flipped everything upside down, and it felt so good to watch. This was the climax, the top of the story mountain. Jake's secret was out, and it was way bigger than anyone guessed. But what would happen next? Would Karen give up? Would the neighbors keep cheering? Stick with me, because this tale's not over yet. Okay, let's wrap up the big showdown. After Jake flipped on those lights and showed off his amazing greenhouse, everything changed. Karen's face turned super red, redder than the ripe tomatoes hanging in Jake's glass house. She stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, trying to find words. This isn't allowed," she finally stammered, her voice all shaky. She wanted to sound bossy, like she still had control. But guess what? Nobody cared what she said anymore. The neighbors weren't listening to her, they were too busy staring at Jake's awesome creation. The crowd pushed closer to the greenhouse, their eyes wide with wonder. "Can you grow strawberries in there?" one lady asked, her voice excited. "How'd you build this thing?" a guy said, scratching his head. Kids peeked through the glass, giggling and pointing at the flowers and tiny fruit trees. For the first time ever, Karen's loud voice didn't matter. Nobody looked at her. Nobody nodded at her rules. They were all about Jake now. His quiet win had stolen the show. Karen tried to huff and puff, but it was no use. The neighbors were hooked. They loved the greenhouse. It wasn't messy or ugly like she'd said, it was cool and pretty, like a secret garden. Jake just stood there, smiling, letting them ask questions. He didn't brag or shout. He didn't need to. His greenhouse said it all. A week later, things got even better. The HOA had another meeting without Karen yelling this time. The neighbors talked and decided to make a new rule: greenhouses were okay. But they had to look nice, of course. Jake's greenhouse? It was perfect, so it stayed right where it was. Karen couldn't fight it anymore. She'd lost. Her big plan to find Jake and boss him around fell apart. She stopped glaring over the fence, stopped muttering about eyesores. She didn't have the power she thought she did, and everyone could see it. Jake. He won, and he didn't even raise his voice once. He didn't argue or cry or fight. He just built something awesome and let it do the talking. His backyard turned into the coolest spot in town. People didn't complain about his plants anymore, they loved them. Neighbors started knocking on his door, asking for tips. "How do you grow carrots like that?" one asked. "Can you help me start a garden?" said another. Jake was happy to share. He'd sit with them, drawing little plans, showing them how to plant seeds. The neighborhood changed. It wasn't just about perfect lawns and boring rules anymore. Jake's greenhouse made people smile and talk and dream about growing their own food. Karen's grip was gone, and Jake's quiet way won the day. Justice was served not with a big fight, but with a big, beautiful surprise. And that felt just right. Okay, everyone, we've reached the end of Jake's awesome story. It's time to sit back, think about what happened, and maybe feel a little inspired. Let's talk about it. Jake didn't win by being loud or mean. He didn't fight with fists or yell at Karen until his throat hurt. Nope, he did something way cooler. He fought with dirt, glass, and a little bit of cleverness. Think about that: dirt from his garden, glass for his greenhouse, and a smart idea in his head. That's all it took to beat the big no Karen tried to throw at him. See, Karen wanted to stop Jake. She said, "No garden. It's messy. Take it out." She thought her rules and her letters would scare him into giving up. But Jake didn't quit. He didn't cry or stomp his feet. Instead, he turned that no into a giant wow. He built something amazing: a greenhouse full of plants, lights, and surprises. When everyone saw it, their jaws dropped. They didn't care about Karen's rules anymore, they just wanted to cheer for Jake. That's the trick: sometimes, the best way to win isn't to fight back with anger. It's to make something so great that nobody can say no to it. Think about your own life for a second. Have you ever had someone tell you no? Maybe a teacher said, "You can't do that." Or a friend said, "That's a silly idea." Or maybe even your parents told you to stop something you love. It feels bad, right? Like a big wall blocking your way. But Jake's story shows us something important: you don't have to let that no stop you. You can be like Jake. You can keep going, quietly, and turn it into something big. Maybe you draw a picture when someone says you're not good at art. Maybe you build a fort when they say you're too old for it. Whatever it is, you can grow your own wow moment, just like Jake grew his greenhouse. People like Karen are everywhere. They love to push others down. They want to be the boss, telling you what you can't do. They might frown at your messy hair or laugh at your goofy ideas. But here's the secret: the ones who keep growing literally, like Jake with his plants, or just in their hearts, are the ones who come out on top. Karen thought she was the winner with her letters and her rules. But Jake? He didn't need to shout or push her back. He just kept digging, kept building, kept smiling. And in the end, everyone loved him for it, not her. So, what about you? Would you build a greenhouse to stick it to the rules? Imagine someone told you, "No, you can't have a treehouse." Would you find a way to make it happen anyway? Maybe you'd grab some wood and nails and make it so cool they'd have to say yes. Or maybe you'd plant a tiny flower when someone says gardens are dumb, and watch it bloom into something pretty. You don't need fancy stuff, just a little cleverness and a big heart, like Jake. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. I really want to hear your ideas. This story isn't just about a guy and his plants. It's about not giving up. It's about turning a bad thing into a good thing. Jake could have been mad at Karen. He could have ripped out his garden and sulked. But he didn't. He made something better, and that's why we're still talking about him. You can do that too. When life says no, don't stop. Find your dirt, your glass, your clever idea, and build your own greenhouse moment. It doesn't have to be big or shiny. It just has to be yours. And here's another cool thing: Jake's win wasn't just for him. It changed his whole neighborhood. People started asking him for gardening tips. They smiled more. They stopped being so scared of Karen's rules. One little idea, one quiet guy made everything better. You can do that too. Maybe your wow moment helps your friends or your family. Maybe it makes someone laugh or try something new. You never know how far your cleverness can go. So, if this story made you smile, give it a big thumbs up. Share it with a friend who loves fun tales like this. Tell them about Jake and his sneaky greenhouse. And let me know, what's your greenhouse? What would you build if someone told you no? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one. Oh, and stick around, because I've got more stories coming your way. We'll find new adventures together, full of surprises and happy endings. See you in the next one. Let's take one last look at Jake. He's out there now, watering his plants, happy as can be. Karen's not glaring anymore. The neighbors are waving. And that greenhouse? It's glowing in the night, full of life. That's what happens when you don't let a no stop you. You turn it into a wow, and suddenly, the world feels a little brighter. You've got that power to go use it.